I've been lucky enough to teach here at Bentley for 30 years, so apparently I like it here at Bentley. Um, and I also have been able to teach this versions of this class at various places around the world, including in Cape Town and in Melbourne, Australia, and in Rotterdam, and in various places. So I really enjoy teaching it. As Emma said, I've been asked to give you kind of a taste, just a taste of what the classroom would be like. It is only going to be a taste, and yeah, I like most faculty here, we like to make things interactive. So this isn't really going to be as interactive as we'd hope to have you if you were here in person, but we're going to do our best. And I'm going to give you 45 minutes of what, I usually take a whole semester to teach about. So hopefully it'll be enough to leave you wanting more. And that's what George Costanza says, along with every other marketing professor in the world. What we like to do here at Bentley is a couple things. We like to challenge you intellectually, get you to think, and hopefully get you to think differently and critically. And I'll try and do that. We'd like to introduce you to some new skills that will help you today, but also will help you every day in your everyday career and tomorrow as you go to work and all those things. And again, I'll try and give you a little taste of that. In addition to those two things, I like to do two other things. First, I like to have fun, because fun is fun. But the other reason I like to have fun is there's lots of research to show that if you're having fun, you're probably A, learning more, and B, being more creative. So I like to be as fun as possible to get those creative juices flowing. And we'll talk more about that. And I also want to try and exercise your creative muscle a little bit, because I don't think many of us get to do that as often as we'd like. So at least for the next hour, we'll do a little workout. Emma said something about CrossFit. We'll work out your creative muscle, okay, and kind of explore some of your creativity. All right, so I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'd like you to use the React button. So if you look on your little control thing, you should have a button that says React, and on there should be a green button and a red button. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I want you to use those buttons to tell me what you think. Okay, so if you're left-handed, hit the green button. If you're right-handed, hit the red button. Seeing all kinds of hearts, but no green button. Oh, here we go. Oh.
Andy, I think someone is using the kind of hand clapping to show left-handedness and heart to show right-handedness.
Okay, that'll work too. Whatever you want to do. Okay. If you went to undergrad, use the heart. Undergrad at Bentley, use the heart. If you went to elsewhere, or use the not heart, whatever is available. Okay, here we go. Now we're talking. So we've got a couple undergrads from Bentley, a lot of people not from undergrad. Okay. All right, here's an important one. If you like the toilet paper to go over the top, use the heart. If you like it come under the bottom, use the not heart. A lot of over the top people. Oh, some under the bottom ones. Okay, all right. If pineapple is acceptable on pizza, use the heart. If it is not acceptable on pizza, use the not heart. Okay, a lot of pineapple fans. All right. I'm originally from Chicago. You can kind of see that there. So here's an important one to me. If ketchup is acceptable on a hot dog, use the heart. If not, not heart. Okay, if you know Chicago, you know that Chicagoans do not put ketchup on their hot dogs. All right, last one, and here's the most important one. If you think you are creative, hit the heart. If you do not think you're creative, hit the not heart. Okay. A lot of people think they're creative. That's good. All right, got a couple in there that do not think they're creative. All right, so creative people, I'd like you to think about this for a second. Maybe actually, let's put this in the chat if you're comfortable. Why do you think you're creative? Just a couple words on why you think you're creative, and I'll kind of try and pay attention to that. Nobody wants to talk?
Just in case there's any technical challenge. Oh, no, we've got some.
Yep, got it. Okay.
So we have, I think outside the box,
Yep.
there's because I always find ways to solve my personal problems. There's I'm good at coming up with new ideas.
Great. All right. So those are all excellent reasons to be creative, or reasons why you're creative. So now my next question for those who do not think that they're creative, same thing, put something in the chat that tells me why you think you're not creative.
Andy, while people are typing that, I have some folks saying things I can tell a good lie for why they're creative.
Well, good.
There's someone who says, I'm a teacher. It's not possible to teach or learn without creativity.
Yep.
There's someone who's a mechanical design engineer who says they're a natural problem solver. So I know those are still creative, but I think folks might not be able to see each other's answers. So I wanted to
Okay.
share some out.
Good, good, good.
But yet we have none yet of people saying why they're not creative. Oh, there's someone that says they're good at procrastinating.
Yep.
Mental blocks hurt creativity.
There we go.
Oh, I like to follow mechanistic methods, so they're not creative.
Got it.
Use of technical knowledge as application and updating with AI day to day.
Okay. So that's great. I am gonna I want to say to those folks who said that they are not creative, these are 3 words that I never say in my class after the first day. 3 words that I never say in my class. And I'm just speaking to the people that thought that they were not creative. Okay, ready? You are wrong. Okay? Because, and I won't say that again because hearing that can kind of hurt your creativity, but it turns out that everyone is creative. Everyone is born with the creative muscle. We all have it. We may not have exercised it in a while. And in a lot of cases, our schooling, which I'll talk about in a minute, or our work, kind of doesn't let us exercise our muscle. And what happens to a muscle that you don't use? It atrophies, it goes away. But you can always exercise to bring it back. And if you do think you're creative, well done, you are. But even then, if you know your creative muscle and you've used it, you can still exercise it and make it bigger. So exercising creative muscle can always be helpful, always. So one thing I like to do in the class, and we will do a little bit of this, I'll give you a little taste, is exercise that creative muscle. One thing I often hear when I do this exercise is people raise their hand and say, I'm not creative because I'm not artistic. Gotcha. I'm not artistic either. I can't draw to save my life. But that's okay because art is one part of creativity, one thing that is creative. It's certainly creative, no question about that. But there's much, 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 many other ways to be creative besides just art. Some of you talked about some of the things that you're creative. You're full of ideas. You're a teacher. Okay, mechanical design engineer. You probably are a good artist too there. But all those things are other ways to be creative. So creativity is much more than just art. I like the person. One of the person said for not being creative that they can procrastinate at times. Boy, howdy, me too. But it turns out if you do it right, if you procrastinate right, and that's iffy, and we could talk about that too, procrastination can leave you time for ideas to bounce around and good ideas to come up in your head. There's something called the procrastinator's excuse, and that's not what I'm talking about. The procrastinator's excuse is I work better under pressure. No, you work under pressure, but you don't work better. So if you want to incubate, which is the kind of sort of procrastination, you have to look at the problem first, let it bounce around in your head, and then you can put it away for a little bit. That's incubation. There's a subtle difference between the two. Okay, anyway, everyone has the creative muscle. We have a school system that conspires to keep us from being creative. So I should kill this here. Okay. There are 2 parts to creativity. There's divergent thinking and there's convergent thinking. And both of those parts are very important. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both, okay? So divergent thinking is when you come up with lots and lots of answers. And convergent thinking is when you decide which of those answers is the one that you're going to use. Both of those are really, really important. The school system, though, and in a lot of our jobs, focuses on this part, the one answer. Find the one answer that is going to make you do well on the exam. Find the one answer that your boss is going to like the best. So you converge. And what often happens is you converge too soon before you do this part. Okay? So this part is important. This part is important. The school system focuses on this. And I'm going to do something that I do in class. And there's a folk singer named Harry Chapin that you may have heard of. The song you may have heard of is called Cats in the Cradle. But he sings a lot of other songs. He's an old folk singer from the 70s. And he has a song that kind of talks about how the school system beats the creativity out of people. I could go on a rant about that. I won't, but I could. But this song it's a good song, and I'm going to sing part of this song to you, not because I think I can sing, because as you're about to find out, I cannot. But this song really kind of gets the point across. Okay, so you ready? There's so many colors in a rainbow, so many colors in the morning sun, so many colors in a flower, and I see every one. Flowers are red, my son, green leaves are green. There's no need to see flowers any other way than the way they always have been seen. Oh, thank you for the heart. Okay, so the point of that song, oh, thank you.
Andy, I will say, just to take you down, someone did write in the chat whether it was time to mute. So you're getting parts, but you also are right.
Good idea. Point of that song is this little boy goes to school and he's coloring purple flowers and, you know, yellow leaves or whatever. And the teacher comes to him and says, no, green leaves are green, flowers are red, green leaves are green. By the end of the song, he goes to a different school. He's coloring his red flowers and green leaves as teacher told him to. And a new teacher comes to him and says, well, why don't you try different colors? And he's like, nope, can't do that. And I think that's the problem. Again, I could go off on a whole rant about this and about the evils of standardized testing and all kinds of stuff like that. But I won't. We could do that in class sometime if you join me. The point is, we are all very good at converging, but some of us don't get enough practice at diverging, and both are important. Okay? There's a nice saying that I often say I'm going to get tattooed on my large forehead, and that is, it's easier to tone down a crazy idea than it is to pump life into a boring one. So when you're diverging, you should come up with a lot of answers and crazy ideas. Don't worry about feasibility or practicality or any of those things. Those are questions that you ask yourself when it comes to converging. If you ask yourself that too soon, you end up, instead of diverging, diverge, and you don't get to the crazy answers. And therefore you're not, somebody said thinking outside the box. You're not thinking outside the box, okay? And what you can't do is this. You can't converge first and then diverge. It doesn't work like that. You're cutting yourself out too soon. Turns out that this whole process is iterative. You diverge, you converge, you diverge, you converge, you diverge, you converge. Keep going back and forth, but it's got to start with the diverging. That's the way it's going to start. There's a great book called Creativity Rising. Forgot it there for a second. Creativity Rising, and in it, they have a metaphor in which they compare divergent thinking to a gas pedal and convergent thinking to a brake pedal. Nobody wants to get into a car with just a gas pedal. Nobody wants to get into a car with just a brake pedal. And you don't want to get into the car and either press them both at the same time or go back and forth like this. You want to press the gas pedal for as long as possible until you get to your destination and then press the brake pedal. And that's the way we should think about divergent and convergent thinking. Okay, so none of that. All right. So now, this is where I try to challenge you intellectually. I would like you to think of what it means to be creative. So if I were to show you something, this thing, and say, is this thing creative? How would you judge whether or not this thing is creative? What words would you use to describe if it was creative or if it's not creative? And I want you to try and be very concrete. So, thinking outside the box is a wonderful poetic answer to creativity. but what words will you use to describe something as creative? And you can put your words into the chat.
Andy, so far we have unique, we
Mhm.
have functionality/use, expressive, unconventional, unexpected, innovative,
Okay.
emotional, wonderful, fresh. Something that's creative can be utilized in many ways. Designed to meet the requirements that were personal to the maker. Creation.
Okay. All right. That those are great words for this. And we could go on for this. And the truth is, there's not a lot of agreement among people who study creativity on how to define creative. And it's because of all the things that you said, because there's so many different dimensions of it. Most people agree that to be defined as creative, something has to be new or original or novel or unique or some innovative, some word that describes originality. It has to be new. Then you could ask yourself, well, new to who? New to everybody? New to the whole world? Or just new to the creator? And we can talk about that in a second. And so that's one dimension. Most people agree that in order to be deemed creative, it also has to be useful, or somebody said functional, or meet requirements, or things like that. Okay, so and I use the word useful, which is kind of problematic, but again, take my class and we'll talk about why. But useful just means it's meaningful or purposeful. Not everyone even agrees that that second dimension is necessary, that usefulness or purposefulness is necessary. Most people agree that novelty is necessary. Usefulness, about half and half. And then all the other things that you said have come up in the scientific literature about creativity. It needs to be surprising. It needs to be revolutionary. It needs to be personal. It needs to be emotional. It needs to be beautiful. All those things have come up as possible dimensions of creativity. The truth is, though, that it always is going to depend how you think if you see something as creative. It's always going to depend. I have a couple of paintings I want to show you. And again, I show these not because art equals creativity, but it is one aspect of creativity. Yeah. Here we go. There's the first one. So I would like you to raise your hand if you like this painting, or clap, whatever the reaction is. Clap if you like this painting. Okay. A couple of you do. A lot of you do. Good. All right. Now I'd like you to clap, or again, yeah, clap if you'd like to own this painting. Let me ask you this. Would you like to own this painting if I gave it to you for free? Because in that case, everyone should be clapping because this painting is worth millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. Now, my last question is, think about, you don't have to clap or anything, but think about, do you think this painting is creative? Okay. So first of all, those of you who didn't like it, perfectly reasonable. Not everybody likes Picasso. Um, but is it creative? Those are two different questions. So when you're talking about creativity, you have to separate out, do you like it from do you think it's creative? Because there's plenty of things that I don't like that I think is very creative. And if you just apply my two dimensions, which have your own definition, but my two dimensions are novelty and usefulness to this. Was it novel? Yeah, it was novel at the time. Nobody had painted anything like this. Was it useful? That's a tougher question. But I would say if it was useful to one person, if it was useful to Pablo, because Pablo and I are on a first name basis, if it was useful to Pablo, And he was trying to convey some emotion or something, and he succeeded at doing that for him, even if nobody else saw it. And that's another possible dimension of creativity. But to me, even if nobody else saw it, I would call this creative because it was useful to him. Turns out, I mean, we could argue about this. And in fact, when we're in class, we do argue about this, but it's going to be hard to argue over chat and everything. But it turns out that a lot of people think it's not that useful. Okay, well, but a lot of people do because it kind of launched, or at least I don't know about this painting, but Pablo Picasso launched a whole new branch of art. So it was useful to somebody. And if nothing else, we're sitting here talking about it. So it's useful to us in some ways. So like it versus creative, two different questions. Okay, another piece of art. Okay, before we talk about this, I just want to point out that this little white dot here is a flaw on my slide. It doesn't exist on the original. But I want to ask you same questions. Do you like this? Clap or use that reaction. Ooh, nobody likes the black square. Okay, all right. Same question. Would you like to own it if I gave it to you? Everybody should be clapping because again, this is worth millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. I've actually gone to see this painting. I was teaching this class in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and I was talking about the black square. And one of the people in the class said, that's on exhibit in Amsterdam. Well, I jumped out of the class, ran to the train, ran to Amsterdam and saw it. And it's literally about, you can't see, but it's probably about 1.5 feet square. So it's pretty small. But this guy, Malevich, thought it was the pinnacle of his career. The pinnacle of his career. Is it so much so that when he exhibited it, he put it in the top of, by the ceiling, looking over the rest of his work. So talk about, is it novel? Was it the first black square ever created? I don't know, probably not. Was it the first black square ever created by Malevich? Aha. Yes. Yes. Was it the first black square created by Malevich in order to say what Malevich wanted to say? Yes. So who created this goes into the definition of whether it was creative or not. And Malevich, who was a famous painter, and you can look up the black square, or I can send you some links about it if you'd like. But the black square it's worth millions of dollars. And Malevich thought that it was the building block of all visual art. And the rest of his work was kind of similar. He had white squares, he had different shapes and everything, all kinds of different work. But he thought that the black square was the building block of all pieces of art, visual art. And if you think about that, and this was in the early 1900s, I think, maybe late 1800s, I'm not sure. If you think about that, that sounds familiar, right? What is that also known as? It's known as a pixel. So he was way ahead of his time. And so to Malevich, with Malevich's name on it, it was new. It was useful, at least to Malevich, and it turns out to other people as well. So I would call this creative. One more piece of art, and then we're going to move on. So we can get to exercising your muscle. Okay, this is the orange square. Clap your hand if you like it. Okay. Clap your hand if you think it's creative. Okay. And clap your hand if you'd like to own it. And think to yourself, how much do you think this orange square is worth? Here's the answer. Here it is. You can kind of see it there in the background, right? It's worth about $5, whatever the canvas is. Not worth that much. But, and here's the point. Was it new? Yes. Nobody had created an orange square like this. Was it useful? Don't know until you know what the backstory is. And the backstory is I was teaching this class, and we had the whole black square thing going in this class, and this was in Australia. And at the end of the class, the students in the class got together, bought a canvas and some paint, and each of the students made a swipe of orange paint because they knew my favorite color was orange paint on this. So while it's not worth a lot, it's fairly priceless to me. And it got across the point of they were appreciative of my class. So got across the point. And by the way, I say it's priceless, but if anybody on this would like to buy this for $1 million, it's yours. But generally speaking, it's fairly priceless. And the point of all this is you cannot separate out, and somebody said something like this in the chat. You cannot separate out a judgment about whether something is creative from the context in which it's created. What is its goal? What is its purpose? What is it trying to convey? My background is in advertising. And you could have a brand new ad that is very entertaining and people remember, but if the goal of the ad is for people to remember the brand name and they do not remember the brand name, even though they remember the commercial. You've seen commercials where you're like, oh, that's a funny commercial. What's the brand? I don't know. Even if that happens, that's a non-creative commercial to me because it's new and it's emotional and all those other things you said, but it wasn't useful. So that's, and in my opinion, that is a failure in the convergent part. They didn't get to that convergent part. Okay. All right. So we're going to get to some activities for you so you can warm up that muscle. Some of you might have seen this. Nope, not that. Not that either. Oh, okay. We'll get right to this. All right. Now you're warmed up. We're going to do some divergent thinking. All right. I want you, this is a divergent thinking task, which means what I want you to do is at your desk or wherever you are, on a piece of paper or on your computer, I'm going to give you a task, and I want you to write as many ideas for this task as you can. Get through as many as you can. The object is quantity, not quality, okay? Sad news. Your house has been invaded by mice. Sorry. And I want you to think of the worst idea ever. The worst idea ever to get rid of these mice. And write them down as fast as you can. I want you to get at least 10, 15 ideas for the worst idea ever. Go. Okay, you're already putting them in the chat, which was good. That's right. That was the next thing. Okay, so you can stop. When you're divergent thinking, the point is to go beyond your first answer, which I'm going to talk about as well in a second, to figure out what the second answer is and the third answer and keep going. Don't get stuck on your first answer. And then, so you diverge. And then when I ask you to converge, then you pick the one answer that you want to keep going with. Okay. And the reason why I wanted to let this go a little bit longer, but I want to get to some other things before we wrap up. You should let these things go. And a lot of people, when they're brainstorming or ideating like this, they'll have idea, and then they'll stop. Idea. And it's often that first idea, those are called chains and breaks. It's often that first idea after a break that is most creative. But the problem is a lot of people will do idea, then they'll stop. Guess I'm out of ideas, and then stop. Okay. Force yourself to keep going, to keep diverging. Don't worry about that silence or that break. That's a good sign. Your next idea is probably going to be pretty good. Okay. And then you converge and you pick the ones you think you really want, or the one that you really want to work with. The reason why the worst idea ever is a good exercise is because it turns off your voice of judgment. It makes it go away. Because I've asked you for bad ideas. So your voice of judgment is a little voice inside your head that says, "Ah, that's a bad idea." Exactly. Yeah, it's a bad idea. So that's what I wanted. So then the next step in this game is to ask you to pick your worst idea and tell us what it is. So I'm just going to pick one on here. Um, Persian cats. I like that idea. Okay, let's do use a machine gun. Okay. All right, use a machine gun, throw a wall at them, build a pond next to their abode. All right. So let's do use a machine gun. What happens, you can use these bad ideas, worst ideas ever, as a stepping stone idea. And you can take the stepping stone idea and take its essence and use that as inspiration for another round of diverging based on that. So use a machine gun. Okay, we're not going to be shooting up our house, but maybe just take the essences, make it unpleasant for them. Maybe we can find some sort of spice that they don't like and spray that spice around the house so that they'll leave of their own accord. Just a thought. So the point is use it as a stepping stone idea. Okay. All right. Okay. This is a multiple choice exam. And this is the next exercise. We'll do this fairly quickly. Um, Multiple choice exam. The question is, which of these shapes is unique? Okay, and you have to pick A, B, C, D, or E. Emma, are you going to? Oh, there we go. Thank you. So Emma put up a poll. You pick the one you think is unique. All right, do we have some results, Emma?
We do. We have about 54% of people responding, and we have the winner is C at 69%. And then following behind that is E at 25% and B at 22%.
Okay. Okay, so in class, I challenge people with this question, and I tell them that they need to come up with a consensus on which is the most unique. And I tell them there's going to be some little prize for the consensus. I'll bring donuts in or something like that. If you get the right answer, you got to get the right answer. Okay. So and make them come to consensus. I'm not going to make you all discuss this because that would be hard in a webinar and come to a consensus. But let's just go with the vote and say that the answer that you chose is C. Okay. Congratulations. That's the right answer. You get the donuts. Okay. Congratulations. But what's the next right answer? And what's the answer after that? And the answer after that? So the truth is that any of these could be deemed the right answer. They're all unique in different ways. But again, we often come to, all right, the right answer is C, all done. But if you want to be creative, you go beyond the first right answer. You look for the second right answer. So that's a big barrier to creativity, believe it or not, is the right answer. We got the right answer, I'm done. Keep looking. Look for the next right answer and the next right answer. So I'm going to ask you another question. And I want you all at home to shout out the right answer, the first right answer, the real right answer when you see the question, all right? What is half of 8? Half of 8 is 4. When you're doing taxes, half of 8 is 4. Don't get creative when you're doing your taxes, okay? But what's the next right answer? Okay, 4 is the right answer, but there are several right answers to this. So another right answer, 0. How is 0 half of 8? Draw 8, cut it in half. Draw 8, cut it in half vertically. E the other way, W, M. So these are all different ways you can half 8. So, and I'm sure you could come up with others. My favorites are EIJ. So that's half of the word 8, EIGHT. Okay, and then the other half would be CHT. Yeah, I got that right. And then my favorite one is AL. Half of 8 is AL. And that's half of ATE. Okay. And then you take off the hyphen and E. All right. The point of this is, yeah, 4's the right answer if you're doing your taxes. But if I'm asking you to be creative, put down 4 and then keep going. Look for the next right answer and the next right answer and the next right answer and the next right answer after that. And then when you're converging, so that's the diverging part. When you're converging, you might decide that 4 is the answer you want, or C is the answer you want, or whatever. But don't get so stuck. Don't converge on 4 first if you're looking for creativity, and then get stuck there. The truth is, we're not always looking for creativity. If we were always looking for creativity, our days would be very hard. Sometimes you just want to do what you want to do and not be creative about it. But if you're in a situation where you're trying to be creative, then find that right answer and then keep going. Look for the next right answer, the next right answer, and the next right answer after that. Okay. So just to wrap up, and then as Emma said, that we can do some questions. What does this have to do with data and insight? Because I know that's important. Well, it has everything to do with data and insight, as far as I'm concerned. When you're looking at data, just seeing data, whatever the form it is, whether it's 4s or activities or whatever the data is, just seeing the data is useless. But looking at the data and allowing yourself to see new things, to make new connections, that's the whole point of data. That's when data becomes information and data can be turned into ideas. And looking for second right answers and jumping the judgment barrier, those are both key to doing that, at least starting to do that. Steve Jobs said that creativity is making connections. Data can be, creativity is connecting the dots. That's what Steve Jobs said. Data can be the dots, but the creativity comes in when you're connecting those dots. And that's what we try to teach at Bentley in general, but also in my creativity classes. Okay. So Emma, are you going to say questions or should I be reading them somewhere?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to share them. Andy, that was amazing. My creative muscle is tired, maybe less tired than if I had done CrossFit. But we'll start with a question, which is how can I help my team engage in divergent thinking?
So the single most important thing for team divergent thinking, I said the single most important thing, but I'm going to give you 2 things: trust and safety. And trust and safety lead to psychological safety, which is a construct developed and written about by a woman at Harvard named Amy Edmondson. Amy Edmondson. And psychological safety comes from the leader being vulnerable, the leader being curious. Curious is really important. The leader being optimistic that an answer will come. The leader not having answers, but looking for answers. So if you can build trust and safety by doing those things, and Dr. Edmondson talks about a bunch of other things that go into psychological safety. If you can build that, your team is much likely to be willing to ignore their voice of judgment so that they diverge first. And then you, the leader, can then bring them back and start converging.
Andy, we have another question, which I absolutely love, and I could use as a setup for what I'm going to say at the end, but I'm not going to, which is they're really interested in learning more from you. And I'll talk a little bit about literally how to do that. But I'm curious, in your broader course, help us understand some other things that folks might learn about if they were able to engage with you over the course of a full semester.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, I talk about the importance of curiosity and building curiosity. We go over a lot of barriers to creativity because it turns out there are a lot of barriers to creativity, things that get in your way, and then ways to get through those barriers. I talk about humor, the importance of humor, because it turns out that humor is a building block to creativity, whether you're making humor or you're appreciating humor. One thing that Emma didn't say about my background, I'm not even sure if Emma knows about my background, but many, many, many years ago, I took some improv comedy classes.
You know this.
Um, and I bring some of that stuff into my class. In fact, that's kind of my origin story. I took improv comedy classes, frankly, for, well, shits and giggles. But then I started bringing some of that into my marketing classes, and I noticed that my students were becoming more creative with their case analyses and with their projects and stuff. So then Bentley was kind enough to give me a grant to spend the summer becoming an expert on creativity. And that's when I developed this class. So we get some of that improv stuff in here. So those of you that know improv, yes, um, and then we talk about group creativity and building that psychological safety and the importance of that, and some theories about creativity and how it works. I have a lot of fun in this class. I really do. It's my favorite class to teach.
That's amazing. Well, what you might not know about me, Andy, is I also have done a bunch of improv comedy classes.
Ah,
We'll talk about that another time.
we should get together and play, Emma.
There you go. I'm gonna share at least one more question, which is in I think someone's curious, how do you do this kind of thinking if you're in a more hostile environment or there isn't the psychological safety? I know you mentioned the idea of barriers to creativity. I don't know if you have any advice there.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, if you work for a company that doesn't value creativity, I mean, if they don't want creativity, they're not going to get creativity. Um, you as an individual might be able to practice your own creativity and try to kind of sneak it in. And then if they start to value it, then you can sneak more in. There's lots and lots of ways to exercise your creative muscle so you can keep that going and kind of sneak it in a little bit. I mean, you know, these are all books about creativity. I don't know if you can see them. But they all have exercises for creativity. There's one in particular that is a great one called This Is Not a Book, that has a bunch of exercises. So that's for your individual creativity. I am lucky enough to work at Bentley, who does value creativity a lot. So I'm happy to be here. But I've also worked in places that they just wanted you to do your job. And that was soul killing, frankly. Um, but what I did in those situations before I left those situations was I tried to be creative on my own and do some creativity, tried to sneak it in, I guess is the way to do it. And then when you're the boss, when you're the leader, you make sure that you're valuing that creativity. So your subordinates don't feel what you're feeling right now. I hope that helps. That's a bad situation.
It's really hard. Andy, let me ask you one last question, which is someone saying, how could they advertise their creativity when searching for jobs or networking?
Um, well, I don't know if any of our career services people are on this call, but
I don't see them here.
okay.
But
Well, no, which is good because I'm going to say something that they wouldn't like very much.
please.
Okay. So there's two stages. First, you have to get through the AI bot review of your information. And the career services have ways to do that. And they're all kind of like um, rote ways to do it, ways to get through those. Okay. But then once you get through that, then that's when creativity comes in. And that's when you can come to the interview or come with a second resume or a second sheet of your talents where you've done your divergent thinking and can throw into that list, your initial list, this list, all the things that you're good at and all the ways you can show that. And come to that second meeting with that list and ready to go for that. But the career services people are going to say, because I mean, they have the way the resume should look and the way your LinkedIn should look and all that, which is, I get it because they have data that shows this is what's going to get you through that first initial screening. It's past that though, when you can come with some more creative stuff.
Awesome. Andy, I said I was asked that was your last question, but there's one that I love so much and I think you're going to want to answer. So I'm going to ask it anyway, which is some people don't share their creative ideas because they're scared they're going to look stupid. And that feels to me like one of those barriers you might be thinking about. And so they're curious, what does the research say about overcoming that?
Okay, so this is something, so I talk a lot about this in class. It's something called the voice of judgment. And the voice of judgment is a little voice in your head that says a number of things. I'm going to look stupid. This isn't creative enough. People are going to laugh at me. All of that stuff. Okay. And there's various things you can say to yourself to get through that. There's another book called The Creative Habit, I think. The Creative Habit by Twyla Tharp, who's a choreographer. She has a whole chapter devoted to those things that she hears in her head, and she's very creative, and how she gets past them. But I think they all come down to this. Recognize when you're in a situation where you're trying to be creative. Everybody is trying to be creative. Everybody. And they're all hearing that voice. So if they're all sitting in the meeting going, I'm not going to say that because that's stupid. They're going to think I'm stupid. Then nobody's going to say anything. So somebody's got to be the first one to break that ice and throw that out there. And be willing. I mean, I say stupid things all the time. And be willing to 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 diverge and just say the next step is going to be to weed out, I wouldn't call them stupid, but weed out the ideas that aren't going to work. Okay. But take that first step. And again, easier to tone down a crazy idea than it is to pump life into a boring one. So go crazy, be stupid. Twyla Tharp, one of my favorite things that she says is the people that you care about aren't going to think that you're stupid. And the rest of them, I'll just say, the heck with them. That's not what she says, but the heck with them.